Oh, how great. Well, good evening, everyone. Welcome to our Silicon Valley Clean Energy Board meeting for the month of November. I'd like to call this meeting to order at 7 p.m. and I'll make my COVID announcement. This meeting will be conducted in accordance with California Government Code Section 54953, parentheses E, in consideration of the coronavirus COVID-19. All members of the Silicon Valley Clean Energy Board of Directors and staff will participate in this meeting by teleconference. Members of the public may observe this meeting electronically by accessing the meetings. It was on in the top of the agenda. And any public comments that were sent in advance to our board clerk will be read within the public comment period or the applicable agenda item. The public will also have an opportunity to provide comments during the meeting. Members of the public using Zoom may comment during public comment or the applicable agenda item by using the raise hand feature, and you'll be recognized by the chair. Those using the telephone feature should press *9 on your phones to initiate the raise hand function in Zoom. You will then be announced, unmuted, and your time to speak will begin. The public may provide comments on any matter listed on the agenda. Speakers are customarily limited to 3 minutes each. However, the board chair may increase or decrease the time allotted to each speaker based on the number of speakers, the length of the agenda, and the complexity of the subject matter. Speaking time will not be decreased to less than 1 minute. And with that, could we get a roll call, attendance roll call, please?
Yes, we can. Thank you, Chair.
Oh, here.
1 second. It's taking me to the wrong screen. Well, I'll fake it. Chair Abby Koga.
Here.
Vice Chair Gibbons.
Here.
Director is Willie.
Here.
Hilton.
Here.
Director Hilton. Director Tyson.
Here.
Rennie.
Here.
Chua.
Here.
Elahi.
Present.
Beltran. Walia.
Here.
Larson.
Here.
Ellenberg.
Here.
Flygore. It looks as though Directors Flygore and Martinez Beltran are not with us at the moment. We do have a quorum.
Great, thank you very much. We will now go on to public comment on matters not listed on the agenda. Are there any members of the public wishing to speak on a non-agendized item? If so, if you're in the attendee box, please hit your raise hand button. If you're on the phone, please hit *9. And I don't see any hands. Did we have any other public comment come in, City Board Clerk?
No, we did not.
Okay, great, thank you. We'll move on next then to the consent calendar. Are there any members, board members wishing to pull or speak to an item on the consent calendar? Don't see any. Oh, yes, Director Rennie.
I'll just move the consent calendar consisting of agenda items 1A through N as in Nancy for approval.
Great.
Second.
Was that Director Chua?
Yes.
Thank you. Let me go to the public first before we vote. Are there any members of the public wishing to speak on the consent calendar? Any item? I don't see any hands. If you're on the phone, please hit *9. I don't see any hands. Were there any other public comments on consent items? Board Clerk?
No, Chair.
Earlier? Okay, great. Thank you. With that, then, any other discussion? If yes, Director Willie.
Yeah, how about we pull 1G and get an update kind of on the allocation savings? 1G.
Program funding recommendations for 2020 PG&E carbon free. Got it.
Yeah.
Margaret, you're muted.
Sorry, thank you. So are you looking for just an update, Director? If you can unmute yourself, please.
Yeah, and if after the update, we might have a few questions.
Okay, thank you. CEO Balachandran, would
Sure.
you like to provide an update?
Yes, thank you, Chair Abikoga. Earlier last year, the Board of Directors approved SVC accepting carbon-free attributes associated with the Diablo Canyon nuclear plant and the hydro and PG&E's hydroelectric facilities for SVCE. The underlying rationale was we pay for it already, our customers pay for it, and so we should get the benefit of it. So we had discussions with the board approved it, and part of the approval process was we were going to use the money that we saved for specific purposes. So we are able to tell you that so far we have $600,000 set aside. There will be more money as more of these allocations happen. So we brought this to the executive committee, and the executive committee gave us a thumbs up on this. And essentially what we'd like to do is spend $400,000 for charging at multi-unit dwellings, EV charging. It's a very hard to reach market. And so this would be what's known as level 1 and level 2 charging. And if you give us approval for that, then we'll go into actually figuring out which multi-unit dwellings will benefit from EVs. The remaining 200,000 will be dedicated to a program to provide 50 portable batteries for free for qualified medical baseline customers who have historically been at risk for public safety power shutoffs. 2 other CCAs have run programs like this, and they've been very successful. So these are the 2 programs that we would like to start with. And if you approve it, we'll get into implementation on these programs. The MUD program on the EV chargers is definitely something you'll hear more about in the presentation on item 3 on our doubling down of decarbonization strategy. So with that, I will stop and be open for any questions. And we also have other staff members who are available to answer questions.
Director Willie, did you have questions?
So yeah, that's kind of why I kind of asked to pull this. You know, the more and more that we hear about the effects of climate change, just in my view, keeps increasing our need to move to renewable energy. And so with that, you know, the 600,000 might not sound like a huge number, but just asking the question, is there any way that we can use this kind of money to explore more power purchase agreements to increase how quickly we can get more and more renewable energy in our portfolio? And, you know, even if it's nothing more than just a discussion tonight, you know, alerting us all to trying to, you know, do whatever we can to accelerate this move away from fossil fuel. So if Garish has any comments or thoughts, maybe it's not enough to make a more than a drop in the bucket, but maybe so. So, and I'll just leave it at that. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I'd call our overall strategy needs to be a very focused and strategy. So actually in item 3, you're going to hear about decarbonization on the transportation and building side. On the power supply side, Monica and her team are working very diligently to get a lot of new power supply in. I think your point also has to do with other emerging technologies that we want to be investing in. And so that is something that we are looking at. I think our financial situation is such that we can do both. So I take your comment into, and that's something we'll keep in mind and definitely include. We already have this. In fact, in our long duration storage RFP, we asked for emerging technologies. We have one that's kind of on the back burner because it's emerging. It's taking them a little longer to develop, but we'll actually be paying a little premium for that technology. So yes, it's not just something we will be looking at and we are interested in. The state really needs to do a lot more on that. But I think we should do both, and we can do both.
Vice Chair.
May I just make a comment, Madam
Yes.
Chair? I was just going to offer that it's wonderful to hear Director Willie's comment. We're all going there on what is it we can do it and how fast we can do it and all of that. There's a lot of good discussion coming up in item 3. And I think it's just great that we do have this discussion. And it'll be an evolving discussion going forward. So yeah, thank you for bringing it up.
Thank you, Vice Chair, for those comments. Any other comments? If not, this is to vote on the consent calendar. Motion by Director Rennie, second by Director Chwak. Could we get a roll call vote, please?
Yes, Chair Abikoga,
Aye.
Vice Chair Gibbons,
Aye.
Directors Willie,
Aye.
Hilton,
Aye.
Flygor, Tyson,
Yes.
Rennie,
Aye.
Chua,
Aye.
Elahi,
Yes.
Martinez Beltran,
Aye.
Walia,
Aye.
Larson,
Aye.
Ellenberg. The motion
Yes.
carries with Director Flygor absent.
Thank you. We'll now go to the regular calendar. Item 2 is our CEO report. Mr. Balachandran, welcome.
Thank you, Chair Abikoga. So I'd like to introduce 2 of our newer employees. Last month, you were introduced to 2 on the power supply side. Today, we have 2, one working for Zoe and one working for Pam. I'll introduce Hannah first, followed by Matt Lundy. So Hannah Gustafson is our Senior Energy Service Specialist, and she will introduce herself.
Hi, good evening. It's so nice to meet you all. I'm Hannah Gustafson. I'm the new Senior Energy Services Specialist on the Account Services and Community Relations team. I joined at the end of September, so it's been a really just wonderful past month and a half. I'm so thrilled to be here and working with this really impressive team at SVCE. My role here will help support both customer operations as well as program deployment. And prior to this, I worked as a senior researcher at the California Center for Sustainable Communities at the UCLA Institute of the Environment. There, I mainly studied a lot of climate and energy related issues in California, as well as built a lot of data-driven tools for local climate action planning. So I'm really thrilled to build upon that experience here with this really incredible team and to be working with all of you on these really important challenges. So it's wonderful to meet you, and thanks for having me.
Thank you, Hannah. Now have Matt Lundy is a community outreach fellow, and he works in Pam's group. Matt, will you please introduce yourself?
Sure thing. Hi, everyone. Nice to meet you. I'm Matt Lundy. I'm the new Community Outreach Fellow. So I started in early September with Naomi. I'm going to be, as the Community Outreach Fellow, I'm going to be helping run some of our outreach programs like the Education Fund and the Scholarship Competition. Before this, I did my undergrad at UC Berkeley in astrophysics and philosophy, and then I got a master's in science communication. and I am just excited I've enjoyed my first 2 months here, and I'm excited to continue work in community outreach. Plus, my family moved to Morgan Hill when I was 10, so it's cool to be working in something directly involved with my hometown. Thank you.
Thank you, Matt. You got that extra shout out from Morgan Hill Director Martinez Beltran. So that's awesome. Thank you very much. And so in terms of hiring, we also will be looking to hire a senior risk manager, a senior financial analyst, and an HR generalist. So all those positions will be in Amrit's group. And then we continue to look for people on the energy program side, especially after today's discussion too. We'll be teeing up, expanding our decarbonization role. So more to be communicated to you in terms of getting more people into SVCE. I also wanted to just update you on a few things that are coming up. One is give you a short update first on California Community Power. I sent you an email last night on that. So this afternoon, we had a board meeting of California Community Power, and the board voted to adopt the ad hoc committee's recommendation to essentially have each of the agencies, member agencies, take more of a lead role in developing policies. And in the next 4 to 6 months or so, we will be coming to the executive committee and the board to put more flesh on the bones in terms of what kind of preferences, if any, and how we want to manage some of the things that our stakeholders have proposed. So that's one update. 2 other updates on things that are coming up in your future meetings. When we passed our budget, we had told you that at the end of the year, we would have updated numbers from PG&E related to the PCIA and gen rate. Those 2 variables essentially affect our budget in a major way. So when we proposed the budget that you approved, it was based on a forecast. Well, those numbers, the preliminary numbers, have just come in a couple of days ago, on Monday night. So staff is going to be providing a draft update to the executive committee next Wednesday, and then provide an update to the board in December and January. So you'll be seeing more on rates and what we want to be doing in terms of reserves, rate discount, and funding future programs, especially on decarbonization. We will also be having some workshops for the board in the January-February timeframe. There's a tremendous amount of procurement that we have to do in terms of clean energy. And Monica's team is working on it. Melicia's team is working on it. There's lots of policy work and procurement work that's being done. And the grid is changing as we speak. For example, next year, you're going to have 10 times as much battery storage in the California grid as we had this year. So it's just accelerating tremendously. And all of us need to know how the grid is changing and what the impacts are going to be on our big picture things like being 100% carbon free. What does that mean? Do we want to change how we approach 100% carbon free on an hour-to-hour basis? So we'll have some technical workshops combined with what it means in terms of strategy and finances in the coming months. So just wanted to give you a heads up that those are coming your way. That's the end of my CEO report, Chair. I'd be happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Mr. Balachandran. And I just want to, I hope, I'm not sure if they're still here, but just want to welcome Hannah and Matt to our team. Great to meet you both. And I hope that we'll get to meet in person sometime soon, but we're pleased to have you. And I think you'll definitely enjoy being a part of our clean energy team. So any questions from directors for our CEO? Don't see any hands. Let me see if there's anyone from members of the public wishing to speak on the CEO's report. Please raise your hand if so, or hit *9 on the phone. I don't see any, so I will close this item and thank you very much. We'll move on to item 3, doubling down on decarbonization programs. And our staff presentation will be provided by our Manager of Decarbonization and Grid Innovation Programs, Justin Zagunis. Welcome, Justin.
Thank you. Good evening, directors. Very excited to be presenting this to you this evening. Let me share my screen here. One moment. All right, are you all able to see that all right? Great, thank you. Yes, so I will be presenting on doubling down on decarbonization programs. What we're looking for this evening from you all is input on the general direction of what I'm going to talk through tonight. This will help us as we continue to flesh out some specifics and eventually come back to the board in a couple of months with some more details and more of a proposal. But really getting your discussion, questions, and comments are going to be super helpful for us in that process. I'm going to focus on 2 main things tonight. The first is really a higher level discussion of the SVCE program approach. So this is kind of when we think about programs, how are we connecting the work that we are doing on the ground in these programs to this goal of getting to at scale decarbonization across our community? And then that will feed into the second item, which is a handful of program ideas that we have identified out of our existing and planned programs as ones that we'd really like to double down on. And what that means really is sort of prioritize in terms of staff energy, input, time spent on programs, and as well as funding potentially. Not to the exclusion of other programs. We want to keep moving forward with the portfolio of programs that we have planned, that we've identified. There might be some that we will deprioritize and sort of push a little further back. But really the idea is how can we go bigger on some of the key ones where we see, the biggest opportunity, some of the biggest barriers, and some of the best kind of that SVCE is best positioned to play a key role in. As I mentioned, today we are getting input from you all on the direction. We've already been discussing this internally and getting some great feedback from a variety of stakeholders. And then in Q1 of next year, we will want to come back and really get approval from you all and share some additional details. The key takeaways from my presentation today, I won't leave you in suspense, are really that the program areas we identified are multifamily tenant EV access and natural gas phase out. And exactly what those mean and consist of will become a little bit clearer towards the end of the presentation as I talk through specifically what programs we've identified that will feed into one or both of those. But really the programs that we want to double down on and focus on really are ones that we think are going to help us build this foundation that will enable policy. Because policy, one thing that I think we've learned through running programs and just seeing how we can have an impact in our community is that policy is a really important lever for getting us to scale and doing it quickly and doing it for everybody. Taking a step back, the reason that we are having this discussion in part is because the board identified as one of the 6 strategic focus areas for this next year that we should grow our organization to expand efforts on decarbonization, particularly with a focus on supporting local agencies and leveraging the close relationships that we have there. And so this has really come out of that. I thought it would be helpful to start with this pie chart that shows a fairly detailed breakdown of emission sources in our territory. This is from 2018 when we did a more in-depth analysis to really see where emissions were coming from. I think there's a lot of data that can be gleaned from this. The big takeaway for me is really that we talk a lot about bending the carbon curve, which is certainly what we want to do as we help our community decarbonize. But it really is a lot of different carbon curves, right? There's a lot of different end uses. They face some similar challenges and some unique challenges. So there's a large scale kind of in terms of the different types of technologies that we're needing to address. And then when you drill in on just one of those examples, so the largest wedge there was residential vehicles. Today we're at about 32,000 electric vehicles, which is really great. Our region has a very high adoption rate compared to the state, compared to the nation. But we have a long way to go still, even here. There's a lot of vehicles that we need to still convert or move folks out of. And when you think of the level of investment that would be required if we wanted to say, do this tomorrow, how much money would need to get spent, whether that's money from us, money from another funding source, money from the customers. It's a very large number. Even beyond funding, different customers face different challenges. And so one really powerful example is the difference in EV adoption among single family tenants and multifamily tenants. And so you can see here, these charts show market share in those two segments. Multifamily EV adoption, 3% actually is somewhat larger than I would have expected, but it's still very early on. It's just coming out of the innovators stage. And this aligns with what we see anecdotally and what we heard through the development of our strategic planning, which is, EV charging access is a huge barrier for these tenants. And so that's something that we want to keep in mind as well. Another example, residential water heating. Similarly, we've been running a really great heat pump water heater program. I know the board has heard updates on this in the past. We like to share information from it because when we go out and we talk to other organizations and we share, what we've been seeing in our program, they're always very, I don't want to say jealous, but there's a lot of, I think, appreciation and respect for what we've been able to accomplish. We've been running this for a couple of years and we've been on the order of 100 installs per year. But when you think about the number of natural gas water heaters that are out in our community that we need to switch over, and you try to think, what would it take in the next 10 years, say, to replace all of them? It's on the order of 21,000 replacements per year. So orders of magnitude larger than what we're doing in our program today. And again, when you think about other technologies, space conditioning, stovetop dryers, it's on that same order of magnitude. And so I share all of this just to sort of say, there's a lot that needs to happen, right? And I think we all know that. And we want to get to this future fit home, right, for everyone. We want to decarbonize every end use for everybody. And so the way that we see getting there and getting there rapidly and getting there comprehensively really is with policy. And I think REACH codes is a super great example of that. It's a policy that is touching all of the new construction, and that's really amazing. So extending this to some of the existing building stock and some other segments is really what we want to be doing, whether that policy is at the local level or at the state level. But policy needs to be supported, right? We can't just enact a policy that doesn't have a support structure in place. And so we've also done a little work to identify, what are the key aspects to enable policy, this sort of foundation. We identified cost, obviously a super important one, both total cost of ownership and upfront capital, customer awareness and comfort with technology, the existence of competitive products, processes that are smooth and streamlined, whether that's permitting or interconnection with PG&E, a workforce that is trained and able to help customers, understand technology options, do these installs, and view them as providing high quality jobs. And then pilot demonstrations that sort of feed back into all of these other pieces. And so together you can sort of see, we have this foundation on the far left that we want to really build, and that will allow us to enact some policies that are really going to get us to this all electric future at scale and as rapidly as we can. So thinking about programs, it's really about how do we build up this foundation on the left. So if you think about some of our incentive programs, they're trying to tackle maybe this first item. We have the eHub, which is our online customer education center, tackling the awareness barrier. We have Future Fit Fundamentals, which is our contractor training program that we just launched. You can see sort of where those different programs slot into this. I think this framing is really important, especially as we're going to move into now some of the programs we've identified for doubling down, because keeping this in mind that this is the path that we're trying to follow with our programs really helps us make design decisions, figure out what to prioritize, and how we want to run programs. So I'll move into the second item, which is this doubling down on some key programs, again, through the lens of building a foundation to enable policy. Building on what we've learned from the programs we've been running for the past couple of years, and all of the programs that we either are currently running or have planned, and really focusing on the SVCE and city roles. So where is it that we, and maybe only we, can really play an important role in enabling something? As I said at the start, this clustered into two program areas. There's multifamily EV access and natural gas phase out. And then there are 5 specific programs that sort of speak to one or both of those. The first is multifamily EV charging assistance and grants and incentives. This, when we think about doubling down on this program, it would look like expanding the program that we're currently running, which is focused on technical assistance for multifamily properties. But as Girish mentioned in his CEO report, we're still finding that access to incentives is a huge barrier for these populations. And so we want to really expand what we're doing there and continue to get steel on the ground and learn more about what works for these properties. And to do that, we need some grants and incentives available. On the built environment side, having some whole building electrification grants. When you think about phasing out the natural gas system, at the end of the day, we need to be targeting whole buildings. We need to move whole buildings, whole neighborhoods off of the natural gas system. And so running a program that is sort of menu based and will allow participants to think about their whole home, whether or not they electrify at all at that time, at least giving them kind of the ability to consider maybe a panel upgrade, maybe some pre-wiring, so that when the next appliance needs replacement, it's very easy to electrify. And then on the grant side, we target some affordable housing multifamily and really do some comprehensive electrification there, which would allow us to learn a little bit more about what the costs are, what the barriers are, and what approaches work. Reach codes 2.0. This is a big one. This is policy. This is, so we want to maintain the momentum from the super successful Reach Codes 1.0 process. We want to see if we can, maybe make things more consistent, maybe reduce exceptions, but really just keep this going. And on top of that, if there are some cities that are interested in piloting out some new policy approaches like retrofit on burnout or something else, where we feel like there's enough of a support structure in place with our programs that we can actually test out a policy at a very local level, I think we want to provide funding and support for that, because that really is pushing us further down this pathway and kind of testing something out that others may be able to adopt. The fourth is permitting simplification. This will be a really collaborative effort with the cities. When we think about the scale that we need to get to that I talked through earlier, 21,000 heat pump water heaters a year, it's clear that we need a really simple, straightforward process in the permitting. We also need that for interconnection, and so we want to work on that as well. But the relationship we have with the cities, makes this just a really prime candidate for us to deploy some additional resources and effort towards to help make this streamlined throughout our community. And finally, accessible financing. This one really touches on almost any electrification approach we want to take, because the upfront cost barrier is a huge one, particularly for more disadvantaged residents in our territory. And so it has huge equity considerations, as well as when we think about the scale of investment that's going to be needed, having financing mechanisms that folks can take advantage of really is going to be important. So these are the 5 program areas. I just want to reiterate something I said earlier, which is that we're not proposing that we move towards these and stop doing anything else. We want to keep doing what we're doing with our other programs largely. These are just areas that we've identified that we really think would benefit from even more funding, even more resources, and really this prioritization from a staff perspective, so that we can tackle these barriers and focus in on them. So in terms of next steps, as I said today, we're just looking for input and discussion. And then we will take that and come back to you all in a couple of months with some more details and thoughts. And that is the end of my presentation. So I will turn it back to you, Chair Abakoga.
Thank you, Justin. Before we go into director discussion and questions, I'd like to actually open this up to the public. Are there any members of the public wishing to speak on this item? If so, please raise your hand or press *9 on the phone, and we'll start with Mr. Bruce Carney. I believe you can unmute yourself to speak.
Yeah, thank you very much for the opportunity to speak, and thanks to Justin for a very good presentation. I don't have any quibbles with the 5 focus areas you've chosen. I just have 2 thoughts I wanted to share. Let's start with permitting and permitting simplification. So if you take simplification to the extreme, you could imagine a world in which no permit is required. And when you think about some of the graphs Justin showed of the order of magnitude of scaling this up, I'm concerned that if permitting continues to be required, cities will find themselves unable to hire enough building inspectors to conduct the permit reviews in a timely fashion. This could be a bottleneck, and I hope that staff will think about that, talk to cities, and see if my perception that building inspectors are hard to hire and hard to keep is in fact correct. The other thing I wanted to bring to your attention was a focus on houses of a certain age and in certain locations. So where I live in downtown Mountain View in a 70-year-old house, it seems very likely to me that the next person who would buy this house would scrape it. And so any investment that SVCE would subsidize in electrifying my house could be lost and wasted within just a year or 2 of my selling it. But if the focus were on younger buildings, there would be more of an assurance that those investments would be in use, years down the road. Now, it's no big deal for a homeowner to invest on their own in a home that may well be scraped, but it's an entirely different thing for a public agency to move money to a building that doesn't really have a long future life. So hope you all will keep these ideas in mind. And that's all I have to say. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other members of the public wishing to speak? I don't see any other hands, so I will close public comment. I should check with our board clerk. Were there any comments received earlier? I'm going to take that as a no. So we will go to Director question and discussions. I have Director Rennie, then Director Gibbons, and then Director Larson.
Thank you, Chair. I wanted to bring up one thing, thinking about the how long certain equipment lasts. Somebody explained it to me this way. Our temperature rise, global warming rise is somewhere around 1.2 degrees. And they, were explaining to me this idea that, if you went from 1.5 to 2 degrees, you get something like 4 times the effect of climate change. So we would get 4 times worse from what we're seeing now, kind of thing. And then they explained to me that with all of our current built environment of gas appliances, that's enough to take us to a 2 degrees warming. So it's kind of scary, but really what it makes you think about is how long these appliances last. If somebody buys a new water heater or a new gas furnace, gas water heater, gas furnace, how long do these last? Are these 15-year, 20-year kind of appliances? And if you start thinking about how important it is to not get past 2 and start bringing it down, you start thinking, well, we really need to make sure nobody's buying any new gas at all, kind of thing. Seems like the priority first thing is to make sure new that could last for 15 years before it gets replaced should be our priority. And REACH code sort of and all the support around that seems like the place to go after first to me. Certainly trying to get people to convert their existing old appliances early, and I love the ideas of the pre-wiring and so forth so that if they have a water heater fail or something like that, it's they will buy electric, they'll not buy another gas. But we also and then so I started thinking, well, okay, should we focus a little bit more on the built environment, or should we focus more on cars, right? Which one has a longer lifetime? I think people tend to maybe get a new car every 5 years, but they usually sell it to somebody else and it's still a gas car. So I haven't completely thought through, which part of the program is more important, trying to get more people on EVs faster or make sure that we're not adding any new gas appliances. But I kind of throw that out for thought, and maybe staff has thought about it also. But thinking and just this idea of thinking in terms of the new equipment, how long is it going to last for? And let's make sure that we're sort of targeting people not buying gas equipment of whatever type, whether it's cars or built, that is going to last the longest period of time. So I'll see if others want to join my thought.
Before we continue, could Justin, would you mind taking down this presentation so we can go back to seeing everybody? There we go. Thank you. All right. We will go to Vice Chair.
Thank you. Really appreciate the discussion and the work that the team and Justin has put in front of us. And Director Willie, I think this is right up your alley in many ways, I hope. So one is I appreciate what Director Rennie was just speaking about. And I would just put a thought here about the REACH codes and your comment about whether it should focus on cars and new appliances and all that. I would also offer that it's where can we get it's the biggest bang for the buck, yes, but also the fastest return on the buck. Where can we spend it and see it being effective right away? And I think the fact that cars do stay on the road is one that is irrelevant. I think if we can get to the REACH codes, I can see that being a long-term benefit. So I appreciate that comment. I would say that, and we put this in the 6 points of our strategic plan focus, building a relationship with the local councils and the communities to be knowledgeable and get behind the programs. is so, so important. We just had a couple of interesting challenges where one of the building officials interpreted the ordinance to say you can't put a electric car charging station outside of on a building. It had to be inside the garage. If there's a way to have common ordinances, common approval processes. I appreciated what Mr. Carney had to say, Bruce had to say about permits. We have to be thoughtful that permits do require, electrical and water plumbing, plumbing and electrical fit ups that it's more state controlled than city. But if there is a way to have the training program certify that the people installing, I'm just picking the hot water heaters, for their plumbing and electric, if there's a special certification program accepted by the state, then you don't need the building permit, what do you call it? The plant and the building inspectors to go out. So I think there's a workaround, a different way of looking at that all cities could benefit from. I think that that's very good. Just as an FYI, I found out last week at a Valley Water conference that the Sierra Club is trying to work on some generic codes. And I think they don't have an idea of what else is happening in the world. So reaching out to organizations, I think is really, really important. Another policy area related to local governments. Right now, everybody's looking at their budgets, and there's some cities have utility user taxes, some do not, and some cities that don't are now looking at them. And I believe Mr. Carney mentioned several months, if not a year ago, that having a utility user tax on electricity is not exactly an incentive to go all electric. So again, reaching out and having local governments understand these kinds of implications. There was one last comment about early on, maybe in the first 5 or 6 months of our existence, Don Bray and the team put together some data on the type of housing and the type of housing and the construction and insulation, I think, of every single residential unit, I believe this was, in our entire territory. I would think that we could take a fresh look at that kind of data, and it might stimulate some ideas specifically about the age of the building and younger buildings and where we can have the biggest input. So I just offer that. I think great discussions coming forward from staff. So thank you.
Thank you, Vice Chair. Great points. I will go to Director Larson.
Thank you, Chair. So first of all, thank you for the presentation and the work on this. I really appreciate how you've picked a couple of broad areas to focus on and started to create a comprehensive structure, because I think that's exactly what it's going to take, collaboration across multiple agencies to really make the biggest difference. So I'm very enthusiastic about that. I have a few questions about a bonus slide that we didn't get to at the end of the presentation. We talked about what about programs not listed as priorities, and in particular, a couple of the deprioritized items. So on the fleet electrification grants, could you tell me what does it mean to deprioritize that?
Sure. Yeah, deprioritizing that. There were a couple programs that we had initially identified as good candidates for deprioritization. It really means pushing it back somewhat, not maybe committing some staff resources on the original timeline we had planned, so that we can instead focus on some of these other items.
Okay. Would the program still continue like in some fashion, but at a slower pace, or maybe we would drop them all together? Like what are the range of options we're looking at?
I think those are both within the realm of possibility. It could be that we ultimately, drop the program. I think the fleet program in particular, was focused on some fleet electrification planning grants. So it was a fairly small funded program that was designed to kind of help with a handful of kind of technical assistance projects to evaluate fleet electrification. And so we would evaluate, you know, after pushing it back a little bit, do we want to move forward with this, or do we want to just move away from that?
Okay, yeah. You know, given the importance of transportation, or just how large a slice of it is of our local carbon footprint, I think transportation is important. And so I'm not necessarily advocating one way or the other on that. Just, you know, since transportation is a big piece of the pie, you know, we can think about what are the most appropriate actions or areas to prioritize on transportation. And then on the heat pump water heater only incentive program, if I understood the earlier part of your presentation correctly, rather than focusing just on heat pump water heaters, that might be folded into a more whole house, whole building approach, and that an individual customer could still choose to just upgrade their heat pump water heater, but it would be presented in the context of a menu of more options. And one of the reasons I think that's important is that we do have a lot of lower and moderate income customers for whom it would be a very heavy lift to do everything all at once. So it's important that our programs be supportive of incremental implementation, and also waiting until an appliance ages out, so you get the most use out of the existing appliance, because there was a carbon footprint to manufacture that in the beginning. And so let's get the best use out of that. And then when it's the appropriate time, then the customer has the option to change it. So I appreciate that you're planning to keep a flexible approach there, and perhaps just broaden people's perspective on what they could do in the future, or at the same time if they're able to. So that's all I have. Thank you.
Thank you, Director Larson. We will go to Director Martinez Beltran, then Director Lahi, then Director Chua.
Hello, hello. Thank you, Chair. So a few comments. One is the EV charging access. And as Justin was talking through this, thank you, Justin. That was a fantastic presentation. I was thinking about, we're all updating our housing elements now, and that this is really a great time for us to maybe talk and ask about how we can include this in part of our housing elements. EV charging access, sorry, that's what I'm talking about, EV charging access. And, you know, similar to the gas ban, and we kind of all went out to our various cities and then got everybody on board that way. And I think this might be a great opportunity for us to do that, because we're looking at our housing elements, things are changing, and this is something that we have to really expect to come in the new development that's happening with this big push for housing. So that was something I really wanted to make sure that we talked about. Another thought I had was perhaps some type of a 211 phone number. You know, I don't know if that's with SVCE, but if when appliances go out, that there's some type of a number that people can call and just get information about their water heater, about their stovetop, about whatever else it is. You know, we're all very crazy busy, and likely all of our constituents are as well. And so if they can just pick up the phone and call somebody for help on whatever it is that's gone out, we can coach them down the electric avenue. And I think that might be helpful as well. So maybe we can look at, you know, putting some money into that. The other thing I wanted to talk about was the continued advocacy for our Caltrain electrification. And, you know, I'll be completely honest. I mean, in South County, I am pushing a little bit of our agenda to get that electrified here. But I think if we're looking to tap into and break this whole transportation and really push our carbon emissions, that's the way to do it. And so if we can get that electrified, the sooner the better. And if I have all of you and we're all working together, wouldn't that be fantastic? And then I just wanted to mention on the financing of the cars, and I think it's so important that we are looking at the financing and we are looking at the accessibility. As I mentioned earlier, we're all busy and we're all trying to manage all the priorities that are on us. And yet, you have families who are, I'm a renter. And so, and I do have a garage. And so I'm very mindful of the privilege that I have of coming up to that. But I'm sure we've all been renters where you don't park near your garage. You don't park where you can plug in. And so this is an absolute must. It's not even, we can't even lay out the puzzle. This is like half of the puzzle. And so we have to make sure that we're getting that piece addressed. And then the financing of cars. I mean, people can barely afford to live in the Bay Area. As beautiful as it is and wonderful as it is, it's so very expensive. So when you're looking at your car, I mean, personally, I can tell you, I'm thinking, can I do another activity for one of my children, or am I going to have an additional amount on my car payment? And that's just the reality of things. And so I just want to, I really liked seeing that point about financing cars, and however we can get some support and maybe build some support on that, I think would be really helpful. Thank you.
Thank you, Director Martinez Beltran. We'll go to Director Lahi.
Thank you. I think we're having a good discussion, and overall the strategy, I know you want to be able to help people with appliances and other things, but there's only so much we can do as far as how many people we can help. And I think the goal or the objective should be that people know how to use these things. And so I think we probably need to get into a serious PR business or a marketing effort to show what is available out there, provide opportunities for people to come and see whatever is available, how it's going to be used and how it helps. And then the second opportunity obviously is for SVC to help other communities with information that we have so that they can also get on board. The REACH program, REACH 2.0 is going to be critical. As we are doing our objective standards, we can incorporate things like any new housing that's going to be built is going to be will not have gas and will have an EV charger on it. It could be part of our objective standard, which will help the cities also. I think we talked about it last time also. I know the VTA is putting together electric buses or going towards it, so that's going to be helpful. But so what I'm trying to do is clarify the difference between saying, okay, we're going to help install 20 heat pumps for people who can't afford it, or 20, and maybe that's not what was suggested, or set up 20 EV chargers in places where people can't afford it. I mean, that's a good thing, but I don't think that can be a serious objective. I think the serious objective really should be getting people to understand how it's done and how it's going to be done, and getting the cities to pass rules that require it. I think San Jose has already adopted the objective standard about no gas in future construction, and that's where we probably should make more of our effort, because we can either supply electricity or we can supply appliances. I don't think we can do both, and we're in the business of supplying electricity. If PG&E supplies electricity, it doesn't go sell appliances. So we have to figure it out. If you're only doing the appliances just to make it as models so people can see what it is, and that's fine, and have centers where people can come in and see these models and be encouraged, and then do a heavy duty advertising effort to let people know this is what needs to be done. Those are my comments. Thank you.
Thank you, Director Lahi. Director Chua.
Thank you, Chair. I'm also the liaison for the Energy and Sustainability Commission, and we're very excited about this new approach of SBCE for localized programs and demonstration projects, incentives and grants, and we're hoping to get some because they have specific projects in mind already, and I think Justin and a couple of other people met with our team, and we're very excited about it. On the first bullet one, the EV charging assistance, potential grants. We have a lot of multifamily properties in Milpitas, and maybe we can think about on how to reach the decision makers on those multifamily homes. What is the best access for tenants? A slow charging or a fast charging? Maybe the fast charging would be in the common area and the slow one would be in the parking space. And some technical support and construction processes and how this is done will help this multifamily areas. For the REACH codes 2.0, we like to support a stronger REACH codes 2022, and that would help Milpitas move closer to requiring all electric new construction. Would also be helpful to have results from communities that already have adopted all electric REACH codes to understand how projects are responding and cost implications to developers and occupants. Also important to advance EV REACH codes to increase required EV charging infrastructure at new developments. And also we need to support reaching out to development stakeholders community so they're aware. On the permitting simplification, access simplification, we do, because we're such a small city, we don't have a dedicated person for a sustainability staff. So I'm looking for some grant or help from SBCE to fund maybe an intern or a fellow that would help us in this endeavor. So, and additionally, for recently what's happening in Milpitas, because we're looking at awareness and education and inspiration and action, but through easy, convenient, and not expensive way to do this, the awareness and education. So I'm adding, like, we should be in events, like Milpitas is having a big event here. We call it Holiday Magic on Main Street. It's a 16-day event. If we can sponsor like a day, and if we can get like, we're looking at, it's only $5,000. And if we get another grant of $2,000 where we can give away power electric strips that we can demonstrate how they can minimize the, reduce the power energy coming out of if the appliances are not being used. Those little things, I think, because that will jumpstart the awareness to the residents that, hey, you hear a lot of decarbonization, you hear a lot of climate change, but you can do something about it, even little things like that. So I'll be asking for those grants fairly soon, so be aware. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Director. I would just note that our organization has done sponsorships of events, and before COVID, we were out there quite a bit. It's just COVID stopped that, but as we reopen, I hope that staff, we can go back to being out in the community.
Thank you, that would be awesome.
Thank you. Let's go to Director Tyson.
Thank you, Chair. I just want to start by saying I really appreciate this presentation, Justin. It really spelled things out in a clear way. And one of the nice things about having what looks like a really light agenda for us tonight is we get away from the day-to-day monitoring and management, and we start thinking about leadership and a longer-term vision of where we want to be. And one of the things that really struck me was how far we have to go. When I see 100 versus 21,000, I mean, I'm pretty good at math, but I don't have to be good at math to see that's a long ways to go. And so I would just say, I endorse the direction, I endorse the strategy, and let's put our best thoughts into how we can make this work. And the only other thing I would add, Justin, would be, we're not as unique as we think we are. Silicon Valley, there's plenty of other organizations around this country that are facing the same issues. And if, to the extent that we can capture or draw in best practices, what works elsewhere, and piggyback on other people's learnings, I can see how we benefit from that. So thank you.
Thank you, Director Tyson. We'll go back to Director Rennie.
Thank you, Chair. Yvonne actually made me start thinking a little bit. I agree with her electrification of Caltrain. It sounds, oh great, we electrify train, but actually I'm told that if you electrify the Caltrain and you get the double tracking in, you can get the trains to go 25% faster. So it starts to be a lot more people thinking, gee, this is a better way to go. And so it's getting a lot of cars off the highway. And I was starting to think, what if we defined our goal as reducing fossil fuels miles driven, right? So we're obviously trying to get more people into EVs because that's going to be miles that aren't fossil fuel driven. And it made me think also something we maybe consider. I just got a presentation by a company called Cruise in San Francisco that has self-driving cars that are all electric that they're trying to roll out in San Francisco. And so again, this is an idea that more people would jump in a TNC, Uber kind of car to go somewhere, and it would be all electric and they wouldn't be driving their fossil fuel car. So this sort of falls also in this idea of, how do we work with them? How do we pull, so they're going to eventually want to roll out into other cities. How do we maybe get our cities in our county excited about bringing them here because it would reduce fossil fuel miles driven, basically? What kinds of things can the cities do to make it easier? Some of the things I asked them was, well, what can we do as a city to make it easier for you? Can we have places that a self-driving car can figure out to pull over, right? Let's say in your city, you have spots that are left open for drop-offs, for example, especially. So, or what are the other kinds of things that would make it easier for those to come? We have the advantage of having all these cities together, in our organization, same with the Cities Association, to be able to think about these kinds of things and say, oh, gee, this is a great way to reduce these fossil fuel miles driven. How can we help it happen? So, just throwing out another kind of idea to maybe expand our thinking a little bit. Thanks.
Thank you. Director Fleiger?
Thank you, Chair. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, good. I put on my headset. And I really appreciate listening to all the other directors. I mean, they have all proposed great ideas. And I want to thank staff as well for bringing this forward. It reflects, I think, what the board asked for recently. And you can tell a lot of thought and work went into it. And there's some great ideas in this presentation. So first, let me thank staff. As I was listening to Director Rennie, it occurred to me that's similar to all cities currently in Northern California going through the housing element update process. I know many of us are also updating our CAP. And so I'm wondering if SVCE were to look at these different CAPs, the climate action and adaptation plans, to see if there are any common themes or actions in the CAP across the different cities. And maybe that's one way or something that we could add to the list of things we could do as an agency to support the different cities. It also occurred, we just had a study session at ORCAP, and I know one of the suggestions, of course, is to turn the mirror on ourselves and to look at our own operations to see where and how we can reduce our own emissions. And so I don't know if SVCE could also, work with the 15 cities or the members of SVCE to put together either a toolkit or a suggestion package for cities on how we can reduce our own emissions in our operations. because I think we make a lot of assumptions that, oh, the jurisdictions will know how to do it and they'll be proactive in doing it. But I do know we're all busy, as Yvonne said, and short-staffed and have a lot going on. And so to the extent SVCE can make it easy for our staff to say, these are 5 things you can do as a jurisdiction. And then as the council members, we would help to push that message and ensure that they're implemented in our communities. So that's just my reaction to some of the things other directors said. It was great just listening to everybody. So thank you again.
Thank you, Director Flagler. Anyone else? I just want to offer my thoughts. First, thank you to staff. Thank you, Justin, for the presentation. It was very helpful. And I think back a few years when we started doing programs, and I think we're really anxious to just get some programs out, and we've had some, and some successful ones. But now to be able to put it into context, frankly, yes, we've made some progress, but we have a long ways to go, is super helpful. And I think, that helps us to see the direction and the path we need to take going into the future. I have just some random thoughts, but in regards to the policies, so I think it was Director Chua who mentioned it. Cities are strapped for resources and staffing and whatnot. What I think would be really helpful for the role that SVCE could play, and we did it with the REACH code adoptions, but really being able to kind of have a overall view of where each community, each city is. I remember actually way back when it was under the Cities Association. It was actually Council Member Rich Larson from Los Altos Hills who had, I believe it was about streamlining solar, maybe? It was some kind of permitting item that he suggested we work on as a cities association. And I think all of our cities did get together. But somewhere along the way that it just, folks changed, and there was no one continuing to drive it, so sort of lost track of where it went. And that's where I would see, our clean energy or staff being able to be really supportive of our individual cities and keeping track, keeping us moving forward. Things lag, just checking in so that we can, definitely reach every community and have a collective effort in changing our policies. I appreciated Director Larson when you brought up the deprioritization of fleets. And I've been hearing more and more in the transportation arenas that I've been in about, frankly, the challenges of fleet electrification. So BTA buses, where we actually talked about that today in MTC. It's not just about buying the buses, but it's the infrastructure needed to support those electric buses. And then I was at the Cal Cities conference in a EV workshop, and there was discussion about, well, what if we were to take, let's say, police cars, and every city could join up, and there's still some, I think, advancements that need to be made in that area so that we could have electric police cars everywhere. But could we, come together and then, frankly, maybe advocate to the private sector to build the EV police car that would work for all of us? So it's kind of, I guess that might even go into the deprioritization category in terms of innovation. But I think I still see that could be an area for us to work on. Someone had said in a conversation I had today is that there's more money going to EV charging stations than to electric bus charging stations. And so, how do we balance that out? Is there a role for us that for clean energy to be able to play in that arena? It's just some thoughts that I've been thinking about. But finally, with all of this work, and I appreciate others have mentioned this, but the equity piece is very important to me. Accessing financing is really key to all of this because some of this does get expensive. And I talked with Justin earlier today, but in a city like ours, where we have rent control on now, it makes it more difficult for multifamily development property owners to do the retrofits and so forth. And so, how can we help in that, in making that happen by assisting with the financing piece to all of this? So just my thoughts, and I think we'll go for another round. So we'll go to Director Walia.
Thank you, Chair Abekoga. I want to thank Justin for a really good presentation and every single director. I think everybody has spoken on this subject, all fabulous ideas. So I'll be brief. I think each idea needs time and attention and prioritization, as Justin said, to see what can be done faster, getting the biggest bang for the buck. Somebody said, and also I think Liz mentioned that also what's the fastest return, that is important to keep in mind. So two things that really jump out at me are fundamentally it's the same thing. How can SVCE help all the cities across? Whether we are talking of reach codes, are we talking common approval processes, the permits idea that Liz brought up, that if there is certification training for the contractors who are doing the work, the education awareness piece, again, all across the cities. And Nisa brought something to my mind. Yes, we also have on our agenda the Climate Action Plan update coming up next month. So the toolkit, the suggestions for all the cities, and I think Chair Abekoga also mentioned that all the cities are strapped for resources and staffing. It was mentioned earlier by perhaps Director Martinez Beltran as well. So those are my thoughts. Essentially, I agree with almost everything, or I should say everything that has been said, but a common theme that so that we can all be a lot more effective, just like Chair Abekoga said, the Cities Association helps all the cities move forward. It's the same thing, and getting help from SVCE when we are all busy in our own cities, but we can push that faster, and that would be helpful. And I'm very proud to say that our staff person is attending the meeting right now. She attends every single time. So thank you, my Nini, for your time and attention and working with us. Thank you.
Thank you, Director Walia. And Director Rennie.
Yeah, sorry to come back yet again. I may have brought this up before, but my gut tells me that hydrogen fuel cells are a part of the solution for climate change, global warming. And it's the technology, I think, it's still too expensive, but it's one that's being considered. Margaret mentioned buses. I think VTA is going to end up a hybrid approach with hydrogen fuel cell buses for the longer runs that are just too hard to get with a battery, or they have to buy twice as many buses to cover those routes, kind of thing. And then we've got, these big diesel generators, and now Bloom Energy's got their gas backup generators for all these server farms and so forth. Those kinds of things, we really need to get a move to a fuel cell. The problem is the hydrogen, it's too expensive still to make it from electricity, but that's ultimately where we need to go, is it needs to get down in cost. Right now, my understanding is in the state, if the hydrogen has to be made with 1/3 biogas, which is okay, but 2/3 of it can be fossil fuel. We need to get to some kind of certified hydrogen that people know they can buy, that are built, made from green electricity. And I don't know that we can help move the needle on this. What I would suggest is we watch and see if there's place that we can help move this forward in the future. Just because my gut says could be an important part of the solution. Thanks.
Thank you. Anyone else? And staff, do you have any comments, and do you have everything you need from us? Anything else you'd like?
Yeah, Chair, thank you. Just maybe a couple comments I just want to say in response to everybody. I'm gonna respond to everybody's comment now. Yeah, really appreciated this discussion. This was exactly what we were looking for. We're just kind of getting the reactions, some thoughts. I think you've given us a lot to kind of go back and look at. I think some of the things that came up, are a part of what we had been thinking about for these programs. So that was really great. I think there's some good alignment there. Certainly some other ideas as well that hadn't maybe been part of what we were thinking. And so that's part of the goal of this. I just want to flag that the point of some of this doubling down really is for us to identify a couple of key places where we can play this strong supporting role for your cities, like the permitting, like the reach codes, and that kind of support will probably take a couple different forms, but it will look like resources that we make available to you, both to help your staff and also just to provide technical expertise. One thing I heard a lot of, maybe paraphrasing, is this customer journey and really thinking through for our customers, how are they engaging with these things? And I think that's something that we really are trying to think about, is how do we make it as simple as possible for actions to be taken? And then I think something we're also thinking about is as you could hear today from the discussion, there are a lot of different things, right, that are really interesting, have a lot of potential. We'd love to be working on all of them. Probably can't work on all of them, or at least not do it all in like a super productive, effective way. And so that's part of this exercise as well, as us trying to think through, what is the lens we use? How are we prioritizing? We've done a lot of work around that already to try to identify some key programs that seem right, a lot of stakeholder engagement, but we want to keep thinking through this and having these discussions with you all. So really appreciate that. And I'll end my reply comment there. Girish, I saw that you also unmuted. I don't know if you wanted to add anything.
I want to thank the entire board. This is exactly what we were looking for, a very engaged discussion. And I think the dialogue was feeding off each other. Rob Rennie? No, but so very, very good. And we're looking forward to synthesizing it and coming back with a plan. Right, so in February, and so like I said in the CEO report, there are going to be trade-offs. It comes down to, first of all, resources and money to fund all of this, and we're going to have some policy trade-offs that we're going to be engaged in on some very interesting issues. So it's very exciting to be part of this journey and discussion. So thank you very much for your feedback. It gives us what we need to tee things up for you in the coming months. Thank you.
Great. Well, thank you. Thank you all for a really robust discussion, and we'll look forward to this coming back to us again in the new year. With that, we'll move on to board member announcements and direction on future agenda items. Do any board members have anything to share? Don't see any hands. So then with that, we are adjourned. Thank you very much again. Have a great, gosh, I guess we won't see you. Have a good Thanksgiving, and we'll see you next month.
Day. Happy
Happy
Veterans
Thanksgiving,
Day.
everybody.
Thanksgiving.
Thanksgiving.
Happy Thanksgiving. Happy Veterans Day.
Yeah, happy Veterans Day too.
Take care, everyone. Stay
Happy
safe.
Turkey Day.